When you find yourself watching this video today, chances are the past few days have been the most isolating, overwhelming, and exhausting period of your life. No matter how hard you have tried, it seems that every door of opportunity has closed before your eyes. But have you ever asked yourself whether that unsettling silence and lingering sense of stagnation are signs of permanent defeat, or whether they are, in fact, the very foundation of a great leap that is about to reshape your entire life? From Carl Jung's perspective, this chaotic and shadowed phase is not a dead end. It is the darkness that must dissolve before the true dawn can emerge. When you feel that you have reached the deepest limit of your endurance, you are standing at the final threshold of transformation, where the old self must die so that a more extraordinary version of you may finally come into being. This video will not only help you understand the subtle inner turmoil you have been carrying, but will also serve as the golden key that allows you to recognize the unmistakable signs of a turning point in your life. Do not rush to scroll past or look away, because the moment you understand the laws governing the psyche in the depths of darkness is the very moment you claim authority over your new destiny. And your true journey of transformation begins from this very instant. Number 1. The mask collapses, the first crack of an old reality. Many of life's greatest turning points do not come from external events. They begin when your inner world refuses to continue living according to the old pattern. Everything around you remains the same. Your job is the same, your friends are the same, and your daily routine has not changed. But deep inside, you begin to feel out of sync. You still fulfill your responsibilities, yet you feel empty within. You still offer polite smiles, yet those smiles feel completely unfamiliar to you. Carl Jung believed this is not a collapse, but a sign that the old outer shell has completed its purpose. When the mask begins to crack, the old reality starts to collapse, making way for genuine change. In depth psychology, Jung never viewed the persona as inherently negative. Rather, it is a vital psychological structure enabling us to navigate society, shoulder responsibilities, and anchor ourselves in the world. The true tragedy unfolds only when the facade begins to eclipse the self, when we no longer simply project success, but believe our very right to exist depends on it. We cease to merely display strength and instead forbid ourselves from being vulnerable. Courteousness is no longer born of genuine respect, but of a compulsive need to meet expectations. Year after year, these adaptive layers calcify until the ego ultimately loses its way, unable to discern the true face from the mask that once promised belonging. For that reason, the final stage before everything changes often begins with a state that is very difficult to explain. You suddenly feel exhausted by the things that once inspired you. Once lively gatherings now leave you feeling drained. An achievement you have just reached no longer brings the joy you imagined it would. Many people quickly conclude that they are losing motivation or falling into a crisis. Jung saw something entirely different. Consciousness is beginning to stop identifying with the old role. Your inner world begins asking a question it never had enough courage to face before. If you no longer had that title, that position, or that image, what would remain of you? Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This statement is often understood as an encouragement to live as your true self, but from the perspective of depth psychology, it carries a far more demanding meaning. To become who you truly are, a person must give up the sense of security that the persona once provided. No one enters the journey of individuation to the sound of celebration. Every profound transformation begins with the moment a person accepts seeing the falsehood they once regarded as their identity. It is always an experience that is both painful and liberating, because what collapses is not one's true value, but only the shell that once covered that value. On my channel, I once shared the story of Clara, a woman who devoted 20 years to maintaining a perfect home in the suburbs of Boston, according to the standards she had inherited from her family. She always woke before dawn, prepared well-arranged breakfasts, carefully ironed every piece of her husband's clothing, and appeared at social gatherings with her usual calm smile. The quiet turning point came one autumn afternoon, when Clara accidentally found the sketchbook from her college years that had been forgotten at the bottom of an old trunk. Inside it were the dreams of travel and painting that she had once abandoned to choose a conventional life. As she touched those yellowed pages, Clara was shocked to realize that for the past 2 decades, she had devoted herself to decorating someone else's life while leaving her own empty. The unfinished sketches of her youth suddenly became a mirror reflecting the emptiness of her present reality, causing the perfect smile on her face to waver for the first time. The moment a person changes after no longer identifying with the mask's image is often mistaken for rebellion or selfishness. The people around you notice that you have changed and begin to worry. They say you have become distant, difficult to understand, or less enthusiastic than before. In reality, what is disappearing is only the habit of living to please everyone else. When cracks appear in the persona, psychological energy no longer flows entirely into maintaining the perfect image. Consciousness begins returning to its most fundamental question: what truly gives me life? This is a quiet movement, yet one of decisive importance, because every outward change that follows begins with that first inner shift. What frightens many people is not the moment the mask falls away, but the silence that comes after it leaves the face. For many years, the persona provided ready answers for every situation. It told you what to say, how to behave, and which goals to pursue to gain recognition. When that guidance no longer works, a sense of emptiness immediately appears. Many people try to return to their old lives simply to avoid facing that emptiness. Jung regarded this as a completely natural response of the ego, because the ego always seeks what is familiar, even when that familiarity has become an invisible prison. Therefore, if you have recently felt that you no longer fit into the life that once felt so familiar, do not rush to see it as a sign of failure. Through Carl Jung's perspective, this is often the opening chapter of a psychological rebirth. What is falling apart is not your future, nor is it your value. What is cracking is the persona that once fulfilled its mission of protecting the young person you once were, but is no longer large enough to contain the mature person you are today. The first crack is always very quiet, so quiet that the outside world hardly notices it. Yet, to the soul, it is the sound announcing that the door leading to the final stage before everything truly changes has officially opened. As you look back at yourself, can you recognize which mask is beginning to crack? Instead of holding on to that suffocating feeling, let the comment section below become a journal of consciousness, where you courageously name your own reality. If the inner turmoil you are experiencing is too complex to put into words, simply leave a short keyword that represents your present state. Persona, if the social role has become too exhausting. Cracked if the mask has truly begun to break. Or awake if you are ready to let go and move forward. A single line left behind is not only a gentle act of release that helps lift your own emotional burden, but perhaps also a priceless echo that may ignite salvation for another lost soul who happens to come across this video. But when the first mask falls away, you will not immediately see your new self. Waiting beyond that crack is an even deeper darkness, where every old definition loses its meaning. Number 2. The period when the soul descends into the invisible abyss. As mentioned earlier, when the social mask from the previous stage has completely shattered, you do not immediately find a new path to follow. On the contrary, your mind draws you into a silent emptiness where every beacon of reason suddenly goes dark. In the ancient symbols that Jung paid particular attention to, this state is often called the night sea journey, the soul's journey across the sea at night. This is the period during which your consciousness descends into the invisible darkness of the unconscious, completely separated from the noisy rhythm of the world. You no longer know who you are, what you want, or where you are meant to go. This loss of direction is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary stage of gestation in depth psychology. A sense of emptiness envelops your inner world, much like an expedition ship losing its navigation signal in the middle of a vast black ocean. You come face to face with humanity's most primal fear, the fear of the void. The old habits that once brought you joy suddenly become dull and meaningless. Every attempt to use reason to lift your spirit fails before the overwhelming pull of the inner darkness. This state of stagnation makes you feel as though you are falling behind the relentless flow of life outside. Yet it is precisely within that stillness that the soul is quietly restructuring itself from deep within. To better understand this remarkable process of transformation, think of the life cycle of a silkworm inside its cocoon. Before it can spread its beautiful wings and fly freely through the sky, the silkworm must first spend time confined within the narrow darkness of the cocoon it has woven for itself. In that solitary space, its old body completely dissolves into liquid. It no longer has a form, and it no longer has the ability to defend itself. From the outside, this process of self-dissolution looks like death, but in reality, it is the only preparation for rebirth. Your night sea journey is the same. You must endure the dissolution of the old ego so that new substance may have the opportunity to take shape. I remember Thomas, a talented graphic designer in Chicago, who devoted 15 years of his life to reaching the peak of his career at a large corporation. One day, after completing the project of a lifetime, he suddenly lost all creative inspiration and could no longer bring himself to draw. For the following year, Thomas declined every invitation, isolating himself in a small apartment by Lake Michigan as he confronted an overwhelming emptiness. Looking at unfinished paintings covered with dust, he was stunned to realize that he was undergoing a solitary journey into the darkness of his own soul. Only by accepting that silent space was Thomas finally able to hear the true call of pure art, something he had long forgotten. Resisting this process of descent only makes your journey longer and more painful. Because they fear the darkness so deeply, many people try to fill the emptiness with temporary sources of stimulation, but this only delays awakening. Carl Jung once wrote a timeless observation that reflects the nature of this demanding stage. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The psychological pain you experience at this stage is the necessary pressure that breaks down the solid barriers of the proud ego. Only when you dare to face your own helplessness can the light of consciousness enter and illuminate the deepest hidden corners within you. In the silent realm of the night sea, every value borrowed from the outside world is completely swept away by the storm. You are left with no support other than the endurance of your own soul. The loneliness you experience at this stage is not a punishment. It is a purification that washes away the impurities of falsehood. This is the time when you begin to listen to the whispers of intuition, the strange dreams, and the chaotic emotions that have long been suppressed. That invisible darkness is, in truth, a treasure containing an abundant source of life energy, waiting for you to discover it and integrate it into your new personality. The final stage before everything changes is the moment when the darkness is at its deepest, just before dawn breaks. When you accept drifting with the current of the night sea journey, without resentment or escape, you begin to notice a strange sense of peace quietly emerging. Your mind is no longer disturbed by the judgments of the crowd or by the superficial goals of the past. You stand at the furthest edge of emptiness, ready to receive the most original parts of yourself as they prepare to rise from the depths of the unconscious, opening the way for the next encounters on the journey of awakening. Number 3. The moment the rejected shadow returns. After passing through the long days of sinking into the silence of the night sea, you are suddenly awakened by an overwhelming pressure from within. This is no longer a vague feeling of emptiness, but the powerful return of the very emotions you have spent your life trying to bury. Unprovoked anger, the stirring of envy, the fear of vulnerability, and even long-suppressed selfish desires suddenly return all at once, completely shattering the illusion of peace. You realize that you can no longer control the surge of this rising energy. The unconscious has decided to end the long game of hiding, forcing the rational ego to face the truth. Carl Jung called this turbulent inner realm the shadow. It is the place where every aspect of the personality that has been labeled ugly or unacceptable by family, school, and society is stored. To be accepted, you mercilessly cut these rough edges away from your awareness, pushing them into the dark depths of the unconscious. Yet psychic energy never simply disappears. It quietly accumulates, growing stronger over the years, like an underground world existing apart from conscious life. The moment the shadow returns is the moment the dam that has held back the water for so long finally collapses under unbearable pressure. The shadow often strikes back through the subtle mechanism of projection without your awareness. You suddenly find yourself deeply resenting or feeling irritated by a colleague simply because they are selfish, free-spirited, or arrogant, qualities that are actually hidden within you but have long been forbidden. At times, the shadow suddenly takes control through an explosive outburst of anger over a trivial incident, leaving even you shocked by your own reaction afterward. By avoiding the shadow for so long, you unknowingly grant it the ultimate power to manipulate your behavior from behind the scenes. Imagine that hiding your shadow is like trying to force an air-filled ball beneath the surface of deep water. The harder you press it down, the greater the force pushing back from the water becomes, building up as it waits for the chance to burst free. All it takes is one careless moment or a moment when your conscious mind grows tired and the ball shoots violently back to the surface, striking you directly in the face. The psychological crisis you experience at this stage is the inevitable recoil of those parts of the ego that have been suppressed for far too long, demanding to be honestly acknowledged by the person who carries them. I remember Julian, a successful lawyer in New York, who had always taken pride in being calm, tolerant, and composed throughout 30 years of his life. He had never raised his voice at anyone, always endured every injustice, and was respected by his colleagues as a dependable source of emotional support. Then, one day, just before a court hearing, his assistant accidentally lost an important case file. A fury unlike anything he had ever experienced erupted, consuming every trace of his composure. He smashed objects, shouted uncontrollably in front of everyone, and afterward completely broke down in the middle of the disordered office when he realized that the violent, instinctive side he had despised for so many years had been living within him all along. That terrifying experience plunged Julian into a profound identity crisis, forcing him to face a painful reality. The tolerance he had displayed for years had in fact been a mask built upon the fear of rejection, while his anger had been the shadow he had driven away for so long. By constantly forcing himself to appear virtuous, he had allowed the instinctive side within him to accumulate an enormous destructive force. Julian's story invites us to look honestly at ourselves and understand that the negative reactions that suddenly emerge are not signs of moral decline, but cries for help from a self that has long been suffocated. Entering into direct dialogue with the darkest parts of yourself requires extraordinary courage, a price not everyone is willing to pay. Many people choose to keep running away, using intoxicating substances, or losing themselves in reckless pleasures to ignore the roar of the shadow. Yet Carl Jung left a powerful warning about the nature of such denial. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If you continue rejecting your shadow, it will become darker and denser, eventually turning into a ruthless fate that unconsciously directs your life. The journey through this trial is not a battle to destroy the shadow, because you cannot eliminate a part of your own being. Instead, the only solution is to learn how to integrate it, acknowledging the existence of your anger, your envy, and your selfish desires as original elements of being human. To do this, you need to take one courageous step. Keep a journal for confronting the shadow, known as shadow work. Whenever a negative emotion arises, instead of suppressing it, sit down with a blank page and write your rawest, ugliest thoughts without judgment. Then ask yourself, what wound from my past is this dark part trying to protect? Giving the shadow a name without filtering it is how you bring it into the light. When you dare to face it directly, you will discover that behind its aggression lies an immense creative energy that has long been locked away. True compassion appears only when you possess the ability to hurt others, yet consciously choose instead to write those feelings down, understand them, and transform them into a steady inner strength. Once you cross this storm-filled threshold, you will experience a sense of psychological freedom unlike anything you have ever known. You no longer have to exhaust yourself pretending to be a perfect saint, nor do you continue fearing the judgments of the world around you. Accepting the shadow allows your personality to become stronger, more authentic, and deeper than ever before. You are standing in the final stretch of the journey of transformation, where the death of the false ego clears the way for the whole self to step into the light, ready to welcome the next chapter of your life. Facing the shadow has never been an easy journey because it requires an honest acceptance of your deepest wounds. If you feel that your soul has just found a little more courage to bring your shadow into the light, join me in marking this moment of bravery with one small ritual. A simple tap on the like button is not only a way to share positive energy with the channel, but also the moment you light the lamp of consciousness and proudly affirm that you are no longer running away, and to let the universe witness your reconciliation with the parts of yourself that you have long rejected. Leave the word shadow in the comments below. The moment you leave your mark is also the moment the process of transformation truly begins. When the shadow is no longer denied, the process of transformation begins to extend into your outer life. The first thing that changes is not your circumstances, but the way you connect with the people around you. Number 4. Isolation, loss, and the death of false relationships. Sometimes the clearest sign of a new chapter is not what you gain, but who quietly fades away. Your social circle remains, but the soul of the connection is gone. You no longer force conversations or cling to gatherings to drown out loneliness. A withdrawal that might feel like a loss of social capacity. Yet, as Jung observed, your ability to connect hasn't withered. The very foundation of how you relate to the world has simply transformed. Most relationships in life are not formed through an encounter between two authentic selves. They begin with the need to be acknowledged, to belong, to feel safe, or to have one's worth reflected by another. As long as the inner world revolves around those needs, people easily become attached to anyone who makes them feel accepted. But as you approach the final stage of transformation, your inner frame of reference gradually changes. You no longer seek someone to validate your worth, nor do you regard agreement as a condition for maintaining a relationship. It is precisely this shift that causes many relationships, once believed to be strong, to lose their foundation. For this reason, the pain of this transition is not the separation itself, but the realization that so many of your relationships were built on versions of yourself that simply no longer exist. The person who fell in love with your endless accommodation will naturally recoil when you begin to draw boundaries. Those accustomed to your compliance will find you unrecognizable the moment you learn to say no. Even those who once comforted your helplessness may struggle when they see you resolve your own storms. On the surface, they will claim you have changed. In reality, they are simply grieving the loss of a dynamic that once allowed them to know you on their own terms. Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." These words reveal a very different nature of loneliness. The deepest loneliness does not arise from having no companions, but from having to hide the truest part of yourself to preserve a relationship. As you reach the final stage before everything changes, you gradually lose the ability to continue living in that inner division. Your inner world no longer accepts sacrificing your true self simply to gain a sense of belonging. This is not a sign of emotional withdrawal, but a stage of maturity in which your standard for connection becomes deeper than ever before. A clear example can be found in the life of the writer Hermann Hesse, whose thinking was deeply influenced by Carl Jung. After his early success, Hesse gradually distanced himself from many of the relationships and environments that had brought him recognition, entering a quieter period devoted to dialogue with his inner world. That period, which seemed like one of loss, became the foundation for works such as Demian and Siddhartha, where the journey of discovering the self reached an exceptional depth. In that case, isolation did not destroy the person. It created the necessary space for a new inner life to emerge. In reality, This process unfolds in very ordinary ways. You receive an invitation to meet, yet you no longer force yourself to go simply because you are afraid of disappointing someone. A conversation may last for hours, but your mind is no longer interested in discussions centered on competition, judgment, or criticizing others. You begin to value a few hours alone more than many crowded gatherings. Those around you may misunderstand and think you have become distant. Only you know that this silence does not arise from opposition to the world, but from the need to protect the peace you have only recently regained after so many years of living according to the rhythm of others. This is also the stage that causes many people to waver. As old relationships gradually fade while new ones have not yet appeared, it is easy to feel suspended in between. Many nights pass in doubt. Have I been wrong to change? Would it be easier to go back to the way I used to be? Jung believed that every period of transition carries loneliness, because the human psyche is leaving one familiar structure before a new one has been built. That silence is not a sign of failure. It is like the pause between two chapters of a book, where the old story has ended while the next chapter is still being written. One particularly important aspect of this change is that it not only filters the people around you, but also changes the way you see yourself. In the past, your worth may have been measured by the number of people who cared about you, the number of weekend plans you had, or how busy you were maintaining relationships. At this stage, that measure gradually loses its meaning. You learn to value the quality of connection rather than the quantity. One sincere conversation becomes more valuable than dozens of polite encounters. One person who truly listens becomes more meaningful than a crowd that is always ready to applaud but has never understood what you have been going through. The most fitting image for this process is a garden entering its season of pruning. To an outside observer, it may seem that the gardener is destroying the plants as branch after branch is cut away. Only someone who understands the laws of growth knows that removing what is no longer needed allows the life force to nourish the healthier branches. Relationships follow the same principle. Losing a few connections does not mean your life has become poorer. In many cases, it is the very condition that allows more authentic relationships to appear, because your inner world has stopped sending out the signal of lack and has begun to resonate with similar values. Therefore, if you have recently felt that your circle of relationships is becoming smaller, do not rush to see it as a sign of failure or isolation. Through Carl Jung's perspective, this is often a sign that the self is refusing to continue maintaining bonds that exist only because of habit, obligation, or the fear of loneliness. What is coming to an end is not your ability to love. What is ending is the kind of connection that requires you to trade away your authenticity to be accepted. And many times on the journey of growth, it is precisely that painful loss that becomes the final doorway before an entirely different life quietly begins. Number 5. The stage of rebirth, becoming the person you were always meant to be. If the previous 4 stages were marked by dissolution, the final stage unfolds so quietly that many people do not realize they have already stepped into a different life. There are no more intense crises, nor is there the excitement that accompanied the first discovery of yourself. Instead, there is a profound stillness. You wake up on an ordinary morning and suddenly realize that most of the fears that once governed your life have lost their weight. What once kept you awake for years has become only a memory. What once compelled you to prove yourself no longer has the power to disturb your mind. According to Carl Jung, this is the clearest sign that the process of transformation has completed one full cycle. What is remarkable is that the true stage of psychological rebirth rarely gives you the feeling that you have become an extraordinary person. On the contrary, you begin to live more simply. You no longer long to impress others with your knowledge, your status, or your experiences. Conversations no longer revolve around who is right, who is wrong, or who is more successful. A natural sense of calm begins to appear in the way you see others and the way you see yourself. This is not indifference. It is the result of an inner world that no longer has to spend its energy protecting an image of itself. When the inner conflict comes to an end, the outer world gradually loses its power to control your emotions. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." This is one of his most profound observations about psychological maturity. Human beings do not truly overcome every problem. They grow beyond the point where those problems are able to govern them. The fear that once caused you to hesitate does not disappear completely, but you become greater than that fear. Old wounds are not erased from your memory, but they no longer determine how you love, how you make your choices, or how you see your own worth. Rebirth is not the erasure of the past. It is the changing of the past's place within your present psychological structure. This is also the moment when you begin to feel a clear sense of unity between your inner life and your outer life. In the past, you often said one thing while thinking another, smiled while feeling exhausted inside, or agreed when what you truly wanted was to refuse. After the process of transformation, that distance gradually disappears. You speak what you believe, choose what you know is right, and accept that not everyone will agree with you. This unity creates a unique sense of relief because your psychological energy is no longer divided among maintaining different versions of yourself. Your inner world and your actions begin to move in the same direction. From this point forward, you will notice a quiet change in the way you make decisions. In the past, your choices often came from the fear of loss or the desire for recognition. Now, your first question becomes, what truly fits the person I am today? This change may seem small, yet it is powerful enough to alter the entire direction of your life. Your work, your environment, your friendships, and even your daily rhythm gradually become organized around your core values rather than around the expectations of others. You no longer move faster, you simply move in the right direction. The most precious gift of the stage of rebirth is not outward success, but the ability to live with uncertainty while remaining at peace. You understand that life will continue to bring loss, failure, and separation. The difference is that these experiences no longer have the power to destroy your inner foundation. You no longer see every hardship as proof that you have failed. Every experience becomes a natural part of the journey of growth. This serenity is built upon experience, not upon the naive belief that everything will always happen according to your wishes. Many people believe that after transformation, life will become filled with constant miracles. Jung pointed towards something far deeper. The greatest miracle is not that your circumstances immediately change, but that the person experiencing those circumstances has completely changed. The same criticism no longer keeps you awake for nights. The same failure no longer causes you to deny your own worth. The same separation still hurts, but it no longer causes you to lose yourself. The outer reality may not have changed yet, but the way you exist within that reality has changed at its very root. And it is this inner transformation that gradually shapes a new reality. Therefore, if today you are standing at the threshold where everything old seems to have come to an end, do not rush to search for proof that a new life has already begun. According to Carl Jung, the final stage of transformation is not the moment you become someone else. It is the moment you stop trying to become anyone other than yourself. Every mask has fulfilled its purpose. Every fear has lost its absolute power. Every loss has quietly led you back to the deepest center of your being. And when that happens, you no longer have to search for the life you were meant to live. That life naturally unfolds through every authentic choice you make each day. The boundary between collapse and rebirth is, in truth, as thin as a single breath. Standing at the threshold of complete transformation, the most frightening thing is not the darkness of uncertainty, but the fear of letting go of the old ego to which you have long clung. From this perspective, the crises you are experiencing are not punishments from fate, but a privilege, a sacred invitation to redraw the map of your own life. The moment you dare to accept the cracks is also the moment you allow the strongest and most authentic version of yourself to be born. If the echo of Carl Jung's inner world has resonated with you today, mark this milestone in your transformation by subscribing to the channel. Let this channel become a quiet companion as you continue exploring the deepest layers of your consciousness in the journeys ahead. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again on the other side of this historic turning point.